They say never judge a book by its cover. Sage advice, but a life lesson to be learned for most people. The same can be said for games of the board variety. Just because it looks beautiful doesn't mean playing it will be like scratching your nails on concrete. And this very fact is what we are here to celebrate today. My name is Benji, and this is the top 10 games that you kind of assumed upon first glance would be absolutely turgid because they were just so gosh darn sexy cute, but actually turned out to be a winning combination of beauty and brains. Number 10. Disney's Villainous. Seriously, a Disney game on a ball game list is not something I ever envisaged happening, and yet here we are with a quite swish game based on an IP that you could probably cash in on with very little effort at all. So my worst of the best gets a little nudge of props for that mere fact. As you can see from the pictures, this is all about the cards, all about the hand management, and all about the take that. But the best part is that each of the 6 characters you can choose from all have their own signature cards and win conditions. Yes, they're all variations on a theme, but as the focus here is on villains, they could afford to go full ham on the competitive elements. Meaning that this will be equal parts exactly the game you expected and equal parts not. Number 9. Parks. Now, I don't know what you call this style of artwork. I am, as is probably clear from some of the things I say, artistically ignorant. But you only need one artistic bone to see that this was the perfect aesthetic to encapsulate a celebration of the US national parks. And whilst this is fairly straightforward drafting and set collection fare, the track movement that sees you perpetually moving forward a distance of your choice, but not where someone else is propped up, is deceptively strategic, and surprisingly for a fairly lightweight title, all the little micro bells and whistles that add layer upon layer, and most importantly mechanical variety to your game plan, result in a game that has its own unique charm and allure. Number 8. Wingspan. Okay, so you would have to have lived under a rock for most of 2019 to not have known that this engine builder was being lauded as much for its gameplay as its looks. But putting that aside, look at the lovingly crafted artwork and high standards of production, and tell me you wouldn't assume this was going to be much ado about nothing. How can a game so pristine looking and straight edged be such a treat to play? Well, I don't bloody know, it just kinda is. There isn't a great deal of reinventing the wheel here, it's just all very nice and organic and pleasant. And okay, if I come up with one more lazy platitude, I'm going to be accused of not liking the game. But come on, most crossover games are like this. They just do everything and do everything well. Number 7. Everdell was 2018's accessible woodland creatures game, and it won the award for most dramatic component, here in the guise of a giant Evertree. Maybe it's that at a glance that makes you think this is a showcase game, with barely 2 brain cells under the hood. But actually this is pure worker placement with a twist, as it adds city building and card drafting into the mix, and it does so with aplomb. There isn't a great deal of room for error with the worker placement, as although you ramp up your workers by the game's end, you'll never be swimming in resources. And the way you ramp the contents of your city for free, so long as you've already have the appropriate card, pitches this at just the right complexity given its medium weight billing. Number 6. The Reckoners. Spoiler alert then, there are only 2 games on this list based on existing IPs, and this is the second one. Clearly not on the level of Disney's popularity, but Brandon Sanderson's series of books is no slouch either. Plus you've got superheroes, or in this instance supervillains, just in case you were on the fence. At its heart though is a cooperative dice rolling affair, where you're trying to keep on top of the havoc that the lieutenants of the big bad Steelheart are wreaking across major cities, until you ultimately discover their weaknesses and face Steelheart in a final battle. Like a big game of whack-a-mole keeping on top of everything, you're going to be upgrading your dice and gear as you go, and although you'll be taking your actions simultaneously, you work as a team or you get wrecked. Number 5. Unfair. Now, the most inaccessible thing about this game is trying to figure out why it eschews the F at the front of the word. Well, as it turns out, it's because you play theme park owners without a moral compass. And there's a fair amount of take that on display here. You don't have to engage in industrial sabotage, but it's there if you hate people. But seriously, who doesn't love theme parks? Surely a subject matter that can turn a quick buck. Thankfully though, this set collection game that sees you eking out resources early game, dealing with the round's global conditions, and trying to purchase and build a handful of super duper rides and amusements, all the while keeping under the radar from attack, is a genuinely satisfying affair. Number 4. Tidal Blades is a game that, outside of its fantastic looks, only really hooked me with the idea of rolling dice and upgrading said dice, which I'm not ashamed to admit is quite cathartic and enjoyable for me. But when I got this almost unwieldy beast onto the table, I was surprised at just how much choice was at my disposal each turn when it comes to worker placement. There really is a lot going on here, and the variable playing powers don't necessarily mandate a certain playstyle, but each character certainly has their own strengths. So whilst at its core it's a game of resource management and conflict resolution, there's also push your luck in there, where your resources dictate how many dice you can use and how much combat punishment you can take. Number 3. Taki. Now granted, this is more cute than beautiful. The artwork is sporadic and nothing to write home about, but you could easily be tricked into believing this would be a half-baked and disposable game when it gets to the table. What happens instead is a quite perfect lightweight blending of mechanics that can go a long way to teaching you the rudiments of board games. With dice rolling, grid movement, pattern building, tile placement, set collection and many more mechanics on display, there isn't really a weak link to be found here. That, and it's got hard-working gardeners, colourful bamboo shoots and greedy guts pandas in it. All in all, a hugely accessible game that's a looker as well. Number 2. Century Golem Edition makes it to the near top of this list despite being the least complex game in this here 10. Why, you ask, when it's one of those extremely simple resource management and set collection games? Well, in part because mechanically it taps into something primal and fun. Give and take, buy and sell, rinse and repeat. Somebody wins, nobody feels bad. But as I let subjectivity have its moment in the sun, the artwork on the cards in this game are absolutely sublime. Each of the market cards thematically represent what the card does, but the Golem cards steal the show, with each not just incorporating the coloured gems found on the cards, but each have their own distinct identity as well, as if each Golem has a part to play in the larger world. Just perfect. And number 1, Bunny Kingdom, is at the tippy top of the mountain today by virtue in large part to how much this game exceeded my expectations. Committing to full cutesy with a fantasy land of medieval bunnies is a bit of a left field choice if you ask me, for a pure card drafting and area control game. But who gives a people if a game is so fun to play? Even more surprising, this is a game that came from the brain of the creator of Magic the Gathering, which, to be fair, helps explain why the card drafting is such a pure delight. The 3 different card types you can pick from range in priority depending on your situation and the game state, and the way this combines with the route building and area control make for an absolutely fantastic family weight game. And that was me, ladies and gentlemen, counting from 10 to 1. Incontrovertible evidence that I myself am not just a pretty face. Before we go though, it's Brucey bonus time. I toiled and toiled as to whether to include 3 other games on this list, which will instead stand as honourable mentions. It's a Wonderful World is another fine drafting game, but outside of some nifty artwork on the cards, it's not exactly an attention grabber. The same more or less can be said for Call to Adventure. And Dwellings of Everdell not only has exceptional production values and some excellent artwork, I just kinda knew looking at it that it had the potential to be great. So there was no subversion of expectations when this got to the table. So whilst I like and love all of these games, they didn't quite fit the criteria to be on the list. But there you have it, 10 games that ably combine good looks and good times. Let me know in the comments what your favourites are and how you might have compiled a list like this. I've been the voice of Benji, and this is him telling you that this video has ended.